When Cherish and I were dating, her family had a running joke. And it took me a little while to catch on to what this joke was, but what I found out is it was based off of a vacation that they took in Dallas. And so every time that they would drive past the mall while we were dating, so I would be in the car with them, we would drive past the mall in Oklahoma, that's where we were originally from. It had a lot of malls that were around where we lived. And so we would drive past these malls on the highway pretty regularly. And every time we would drive past the mall, her whole family would be like, "Dad, there's the mall. Dad, there's the mall." And I'm like, "You idiots, of course there's the mall. It's like massive, you know? It's like huge." And so come to find out, here's what happened. So they are on vacation when Cherish was a little bit younger. They're in Dallas. I do not like Dallas, so I avoid Dallas at all costs. But they're in Dallas for vacation, and one day they're trying to go to see a movie. And so obviously back in the historic days, we had the movie theaters were all in the malls, and so you would have to go to the malls in order to see the movie. And so they get into the car, they pile into the car, they are on their way, they're driving on the highway, and as they're driving on the highway, they identify the mall, and so their dad, my father-in-law, Ted, pulls off of the highway. He gets off the exit on the road, and so as they're driving in what he thinks is towards the mall, but he can't get there. Like the road doesn't lead to the mall. And so he has to go actually around the whole entire property, get back onto the highway, and then drive back and try to do this whole thing again. And so they're doing it, and he identifies the mall. He gets off on a different road, and it happens again. He takes a road that doesn't lead to the mall. Well, this happens 3 more times. And as they're driving, every single time they're doing this loop around the mall, they're like, "Dad, there's the mall. There's the mall, Dad. There it is. Like, just get there. Like, just jump the median. Get over the curb. Like, get to the mall." Every single time. And so they would do this, and they would all just burst out laughing in the car. And I'm like, I have no idea. This is the worst joke I've ever heard in my life, you know? In a time where we didn't have GPSs and we didn't have smartphones, the only way to get to where you needed to go is if you knew how to get there. As we're looking at Psalm 23 over these 6 weeks, we looked at last week, verse 1, "The Lord is my shepherd. I have what I need." This morning we're going to look at verse 2. "He lets me lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside quiet waters." And what we're going to see is that God, as our shepherd, leads us to rest and peace because he knows the way. God as our shepherd is the one that knows the way to rest and peace, and he kindly and gently leads us there. And the question that lingers over the course of this verse is, will you follow? Will you follow? And so here's my prayer as we work through how God leads us to rest in peace, that we would be able to answer that question by the end with a resounding yes. I will follow my shepherd as he leads me into peace and rest. So let's look first at how God leads us to rest. We find this in the very first part of verse 2. Here's what it says again. "He lets me lie down in green pastures." David is saying is that God has led him to rest. That's what he means by green pastures. Green pastures are like rest and refreshment and satisfaction. So, I mean, imagine David and the context that he's working with here. He's in the arid Middle East. And as a shepherd, he knows that green pastures are very rare. They're not just You don't just stumble upon them all over the place. And what we know about sheep is, like we talked about last week, they're just not the smartest animals. They don't have a natural instinct to find their way to these green pastures. They would never find them on their own. And so a shepherd had to both know where the pastures were and then know how to lead the sheep to those pastures in order for them to experience the rest, the refreshment, and satisfaction that comes from them. And as David is writing this, what he's saying is that is what God has done for me. He knows where the green pastures are, and he's led me to them. Essentially, he's saying, God has led me to rest. And what's interesting is that David says His shepherd has let him lie down, or as many of our translations say, he makes me lie down. David knows, and if you know any shepherd, any common shepherd would know that it's difficult to get sheep to lay down. It's really hard to get them to lay down and rest. There's a modern day farmer, Philip Keller, and he says it's nearly impossible to get sheep to lay down unless there are 4 primary conditions for the sheep. First, they have to be free from fear. They have to feel safe. Second, they need to be free from friction. They need to feel at ease with the other sheep that are in the herd. They need to be free from pests to where they don't feel agitated, to where they can lay down and actually feel comfortable. And then lastly, they need to be free from hunger. They are actually satisfied. And as I looked over these, I was like, yeah, me too. As my shepherd says, also. That's how he says same. Only when these needs are actually met will sheep lay down and receive rest. And what David is saying is that this is what God provides for his people. He's provided this for me, but he provides this holistically for his people. Here's what we need to understand about rest, y'all, okay? In the Bible, rest is a command. It's not optional. The Bible commands that we actually rest. In the 10 Commandments, it's the 4th commandment. It's like the transitional commandment from talking about how we are exclusively reserved for God himself. Then you have the Sabbath command, and then it works into relationship with everybody else. What God is really saying is the way that you rest with me affects all of your life. It's not an option, it's a command. And it's not just about this physical recovery that you're laying down your work for a day and then you just kick up your feet and you watch Netflix all day. That's not what we're talking about when it comes to finding rest. We do want to rest from our physical work. There is a replenishment that your body needs physically. What God is actually after here, though, is a spiritual refreshment that you can only find in him. Yet, guys, we treat rest like it's a luxury rather than a necessity. Don't get me wrong, we love our time off, don't we? God commanded that we have a Sabbath day. He laid down his work for a full day. We're hold my beer, here's 2 days, We get Saturday and Sunday, We love our time off. We love time with friends. We love to do activities that we find enjoyable. We love eating good food. We love drinking good drink. We love doing all these things. Yet, at the same time, it's been really long since many of us have ever Sabbathed. Even though you've had 2 days every single week for months on end. Because we neglect the last part of it. The spiritual refreshment that we find in God. Some of us even treat sleep as it's an option. If weekly isn't something that is enough for us, some of us don't even do it daily. God has baked rest into the human experience. You have to sleep. You literally become not human if you don't sleep, right? We know that this is in some sense important because we all experience at least a little bit of it every day, but we don't quite grasp how vital it is. Let me try to put it into perspective for you. If you, after being awake for 17 to 19 hours, all right, 17 to 19, that's a long time. For me, that's a long time. Performance is now the equivalent to having a blood alcohol content level of 5%. In most places, that would be impaired. Listen to this. After 24 hours of being awake, it's 10% blood alcohol content level. That's wild. Less than 7 hours of sleep makes you 3 times more likely to catch a cold. Less than 6 hours raises the risk of heart attack by 20%. Look, God commands that you rest. and it's for your good. And we should listen to his command. He wants us, yes, he wants you to have physical rest. He's baked it into the human experience. But look, his desire is for an even deeper rest, and that rest can only be found in him. David says, I found it. I found it. Now, here's a good way for you to try to just assess how well you are resting. Let's not do the weekly, let's do the daily. Let's think about our sleep. I'm reading a book by David Murray. Joshua Vallejos gave that to me here. And he says that we preach a sermon in our sleep. Here's what he says. Show me your sleep and I'll show you your theology. And so he says, here's some different examples of sermons that we preach through our sleep. I don't trust God with my life or work. You may proclaim that God is in control with your mouth, but then you lack sleep, and here's what you're basically saying: he needs all the help that I can give him. There's a night shift, and somebody's got to take it, so I'll take it. Whenever you lack sleep, this is what you preach. Another one, I don't respect how my Creator has made me, because you're not embracing your creaturely limits. What you're saying is, God, I'm actually more machine than I am human. The creature is speaking back to the Creator. Third, I don't need to demonstrate my rest in God. What we need to understand is salvation is most commonly recognized as rest throughout the scriptures. And look, whenever you deny rest, you are proclaiming your self-sufficiency. Fourth, I worship idols. If you get too much sleep, you're proclaiming that comfort is actually your God. So look, you were made for rest, not just physical rest, but holistic rest in God. What sermon are you preaching in your sleep? God leads us to rest. Will you follow him? Not only do we see this, we also see that God leads us into peace. We see this in the second part of the verse. He says, he leads me beside quiet waters. David is saying that God has led him into peace. That's what he means by quiet waters. He means peace here. Sheep avoid rushing water, all right? Sheep can't go down into rushing water to receive the drink that they need to rehydrate their bodies. They're also terrified of rushing water. They're terrified because it hurts. Oftentimes you would have to take the shepherd would have to take the sheep across streams in order to get to the green pastures. And if there's a rushing stream, the sheep would refuse to go over it. They're terrified of it. It would hurt as it rams up against their body. But they're also terrified of it because they're afraid of being rushed downstream with the water. So they're terrified of this water. And what David is saying is that God leads him beside quiet waters, meaning he gives me peace. The idea here is more than tranquility, though. For all of us, we think peace is like meditation, like quiet. Things are not in chaos. They're at rest. That's what we think. The Bible's speaking of more here. It's speaking of the idea of shalom. Shalom is this holistic peace and a harmony that literally touches every part of your life. Here's how Tim Keller puts it. He says, shalom means complete reconciliation, a state of the fullest flourishing in every dimension, physical, social, and spiritual, because all relationships are right, perfect, and filled with joy. It's kind of like whenever you go to a choir concert and you listen to a choir and they have all the different voice types and they've done all the practice. And as they pitch in, like you've heard them practicing beforehand, if you go, if they're all getting warmed up and stuff, it sounds like madness. You know what I'm saying? Like, it does not sound good. You're like, man, did I pay for something terrible? And so you go in, but actually after they get all of it warmed up and they start the actual music and they start singing is beautiful. The variants of voices come together in unison and it creates this glorious song that you listen and you bring in. That's the peace David experiences at the hand of God. He's saying, like, the peace that God provides me, the variety, the expansiveness of life, he brings harmony to all of it. It's not just like this, I get this ambiance of tranquility. He's brought holistic peace to my life. He's led me beside quiet waters. Now, that sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds incredible. Man, give me that peace, you know? Our problem is we don't slow down enough to experience it. We wear busyness like a badge of honor. I mean, we view busyness as a sign of importance, success, and value. I mean, when's the last time, like, imagine this, all right? You have a slow week and somebody asks how your week was. We're terrified to tell somebody, oh yeah, it was like slow and restful. It was like, I'm not important. I didn't do enough this last week. You know, like, we feel guilty. We like don't want to be able to tell somebody, I didn't do much. You know, what happens is like, well, pick it up, man. You know, like just immediate condemnation. That's what happens. We wear busyness like a badge of honor, but not only do we not slow down enough because of our busy schedules, our technology keeps the pace constant. The average American looks at their phone 96 times per day. Did you know that after that kind of interruption, it takes about 23 minutes to regain your focus? That means you never can focus throughout your day. Back in 2000, the average attention span was 12 seconds. It's now dwindled to 8 seconds, which is less than a goldfish. We have literally trained our minds to skim and scroll rather than dwell and reflect. Here's how John Ortberg puts it. Hurry is not just a disordered schedule. Hurry is a disordered heart, and that's what we live with every day. You're too busy to experience the peace that God leads us into, that David is speaking about here. Harold Kushner tells a story that I think embodies this experience well. He's telling about this group of tourists that went on a safari in Africa, and as they went on the safari, they hired a couple of porters to carry their supplies while they're on their trek, and after 3 days, the porters informed the tourists that they needed to stop for rest. And so the tourists were like, oh man, did we run them into the ground? Like, what happened? They looked like they were in pretty good shape, you know, like got some muscle on those bones, and like you can tell that they've been doing this for a while. Like, they're like, is everything okay? Do you get injured? Like, are you too tired? Like, have we overdone it? Like, tell us what's going on. They're like, no, none of that's a problem. No, we're not too tired. None of us are injured. Here's what they said. We have walked too far, too fast, and now we must wait for our souls to catch up. That's our problem too. We run too hard, too fast, and we leave our souls behind. Theologian Kosuke Koyama once wrote a book titled The 3 Mile an Hour God. 3 miles per hour is the average pace of walking. And whenever you walk, you're able to talk and take in God's creation and to enjoy the journey. And that's the pace by which God does life. Gently, unhurried, and relational. And he wants us to know him. That's why he goes at a 3 mile per hour pace through life, because he wants us to know him. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." You see it? That verse is said in the midst of like absolute calamity that's happening in Psalm 46. In the midst of absolute calamity, he's saying, "Be still and know that I am God." He leads us to quiet waters. He leads us into peace. He wants you to experience not just physical peace and physical rest. He wants you to experience complete harmony, and it's only He that can provide it. We live like our souls need to catch up with our pace, but God is moving along at 3 miles per hour. What does it look like for you to catch up to Him? David is saying, He leads me into rest. He leads me into peace. And I want to draw out a couple of short little phrases that he says. He says, He lets or He makes me. He leads me. Rest and peace are only experienced by those who follow God as their shepherd. You, as the sheep, cannot find the rest or peace on your own. You need a shepherd. You need a shepherd that knows how to get you there. And in John 10, Jesus said that He's not only the good shepherd, but He's also the gate. What happens back in this time is the sheep pens were actually like they're built like with these big rock walls, and then there was one entry point and one exit point. And so after all the sheep were brought into the sheep pen, there was just this gap. And what the shepherd would do is he would literally use his body as the gate. So the sheep could only get in or out according to his command. And Jesus is picking up this imagery with his people that know all about being shepherds and sheep in order to try to communicate something about himself. And here's what he says in John 10:9. I am the gate. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. Sound familiar? I have come so that they may have life and have it in abundance, like the green pastures provide to the sheep. God knows the way. God knows the way because He is the way. He knows the way to lead us to rest and peace because God Himself is the way. Jesus is the way to rest and peace because He's the one that endured unrest and hostility for us. I mean, think about it. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, He's in the garden. His disciples are off doing what? Sleeping. Resting. What is Jesus doing? He's wrestling in agony, in prayer, experiencing unrest because of what lays before Him as the good shepherd for His sheep. On the cross, what did Jesus do? Jesus bore the hostility that we deserved for our sin, and He took it in our place. He was the good shepherd. The spotless lamb that actually could lay down His life and appease God's anger towards our sin. Jesus willingly did this for His sheep. And because Jesus has done this, He can extend to us ultimate rest and peace because it's found in Him. Because Jesus endured unrest for our sake, He can now offer us ultimate rest. Man, we love this passage, Matthew 11. What does He say? Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you what? Why does He do that? Because the very next chapter, He declares Himself as Lord of the Sabbath. He's saying the Sabbath isn't a day, it's a person. It's me. You want rest? You come to me. You want green pastures? You come to me. You want abundant life? You come to me. You lay your life down to me. And I'm the good shepherd that doesn't use it for my advantage. I use it for your advantage. Because Jesus bore the hostility that was due to us, he can provide us with ultimate peace. You know what Jesus said in John 14 before he went to the cross? He told his disciples, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. You know how he gives you his peace? Because he took your place. He was perfect, lived in complete harmony. He's the one that experienced shalom with God the Father. Yet he was willing to go lay down his life to endure our hostility so he could extend to us his peace. That the thing that God only can lead us to, he went and paid the price for so that he could now extend it to you. It's a free gift of grace. And all he's asking is that you would yield to his leadership. He's saying, would you please stop turning to all these other things to try to find your rest and peace in this life? Would you yield to my leadership? Would you stop trying to run ahead of me and find it? And then would you stop lagging behind because you're so afraid? Would you yield to my leadership? Here's what you need to understand about his leadership. He's taking you to where the rest and the peace are. He's not driving you from behind. He's a 3-mile-per-hour God. It's rare that you can find someone that's easy to follow. Look, in Jesus, you found it. He's easy to follow. Jesus is the gate. He's the one that knows how to get you to the rest and peace because he is the rest and peace. Jesus is the good shepherd. So the question, will you follow? Will you yield to his leadership? Will you receive rest as a necessity instead of a luxury this week? Will you actually follow God's designed creation order in your life? What sermon are you going to preach through your sleep this week? Will you walk at God's 3-mile-per-hour pace instead of racing ahead or lagging behind? Look, our shepherd knows the way to rest in peace. Follow him. Come and give him your sin. And in exchange, he gives you his shalom. And you can live in it. Let's pray.